Let's start our conversation. Beshir Abdel-Fattah, how do you comment on Mubarak's final release? Is this result regarded as fair by the Egyptian people?
First of all, I'd like to thank you for having me in your program, and I'd like to say greetings to your guests and your audience everywhere.
Thank you.
I'd like to say that Mubarak release was expected so much from many Egyptians because Mubarak was trialed in front of the normal judiciary system, not military or exceptional judiciary system. And this is a very important point. And the judiciary system in Egypt depends on documents and evidences. And the trial of Mubarak was suffering from the lack of evidences and the documents. So it was expected that he will be released. Most of the Egyptians think now that Mubarak was a good ruler to the country, although he stayed or he remained on office more than 30 years, and he failed to cross with the country towards development and stability and democracy. But when people make comparison between the Mubarak era and the recent circumstances, they discover that the pre-revolution era before 2011 was better than now. There are many reasons for that, but in general and finally, most of the Egyptians think that to remain during the Mubarak era is much better than the revolution, and the disintegration of the country and the consequences of the revolutions and what happened. So most of the Egyptians look to Mubarak now as a hero. We know his military background. He was one of the heroes of the October 1973 war against Israel. But politically, Mubarak has his mistakes, his faults. But in general, because he is now an old man and he was jailed for more than 3 years, most of the Egyptians make some sort of sympathy with him after this period.
Yeah, Dr. Eid-Oakden, what is your reaction on this? And secondly, will his release make any difference to today's political scene in Egypt, given that also many members of the current government were with him while he was in power?
I think it's important to regard this event as the passing of an era. Mr. Mubarak was appropriate for the era during which he ruled. He guarded stability and did his best to promote economic development. But across the Arab world, this was a battle between political and security stability and economic development and economic opportunity and advancement for the average citizen. And I'm afraid that not just in Egypt, but across the Arab world, including in countries that have not undergone revolutions and regime change over the past 6-7 years, the battle against economic advancement, or the lack thereof, is the one that won. It won against the battle for security. Therefore, those who gave priority to security over economic opportunity for citizens were imperiled, and those who were not removed are now rushing in order to make a difference to the provision of economic opportunity for the average citizen. So the departure of Mr. Mubarak was part of that era, that is a bygone era. And therefore, the trial will not impact very much, or the outcome of the trial at this stage, A, because it took so long before this result came about, since 2011, B, because there's widespread recognition that the challenges were formidable.
Yes.
And that really even those countries that didn't undergo revolution didn't necessarily succeed in resolving them. And C, because the challenges are still there and there is focus on the challenges rather than focus on the past.
Right. Mr. Abdel-Fattah, let me ask you this. Mohammed Morsi, the president after Hosni Mubarak was hailed as the first democratically elected head of state in the Egyptian history of 5,000 years. However, he was ousted by the military led by General el-Sisi and later sentenced to death. So what does this say about imposing a Western-style democracy democracy in a Muslim majority republic in the Middle East?
I would like to say that the release, removing of Mohammed Morsi related to many reasons. First of all, Muslim Brotherhood was not ready and able to lead the country politically. They have a majority in the elections, and also they can win all the elections that the Egyptian country has organized after the revolution of 2011. But this not means that Muslim Brotherhood has political leaders, political actors. That's why many of the Egyptians begin to reconsider voting for Muslim Brotherhood. In addition to that, we cannot ignore the existence of Muslim Brotherhood and all the Islamic movement in Egypt, whatever they were, Salafist or Muslim Brotherhood or any other wing of the Islamic movement. We cannot ignore this existence. So it is silly that you try to, for example, eliminate them from the Egyptian society. We cannot do that. We want them to reconsider their ideas. They have to confess their mistakes, make some sort of self-criticism in order to resume their role in the political arena. Yes. They have to separate between using Islam as a religion and political ideas, for example.
Yes.
So in the future, I think one way or another, there will be a political reconciliation between the military and the Egyptian society as a whole, and Muslim Brotherhood and the Islamic movements in general.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Yes, thank you, Mr. Abdel-Fattah. I have to leave it there. But last question to Dr. Eid-Oakden. What do you say about this question that by imposing a Western-style democracy in a country like Egypt, do you think it really succeeded in bringing about the changes it claimed it was trying to do?
I wouldn't agree with the proposition that a Western-style democracy was being imposed on Egypt. I think there was a genuine uprising from the Egyptian people against a regime that, as I've said, belongs to the past, partly because it wasn't delivering the goods. Across the Arab world, we've seen this. Whether the leader was deposed or not, we've seen uprisings. And it is inevitable that with progress and information exchange, economic development would take the upper hand, and also inevitable that once you have economic development, a push for democracy would emerge again in all of these countries. Now, what the democratic system looks like and the pace of democracy, the pace of transition, all of that needs to be locally, indigenously determined by the peoples of the various countries, and certainly not imposed from abroad. That I agree with. But I do think that what happened in Egypt was Egyptian. It was well deserved that the people moved and expressed their voice after years of the lack thereof. And transitions are difficult. They take a long time. So I wouldn't necessarily condemn where we are today, neither in economic performance nor in the system that is reigning politically, as a failure in Egypt. It's part of the transition.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Eid-Oakden.
In Latin America, these transitions took decades.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Yes, we get your point.
20 and 30 years.
Thank you. We get your
My
point.
pleasure.